And good morning, TOK. Welcome to Class 7. What do you know? Today we've got two topics we're going to try and compress into one lesson. We're going to be talking about our peer teaching assignment and the TOK oral presentation, how those things fit together. And then we're going to do a quick introduction to media studies. I'm sure you got the email from Jerry Smith explaining that we're going to try and do a media studies workshop together sometime in the next couple weeks. So please, let's get our copies of Plato and a Platypus out and let's get to work. So before we begin with our peer teaching, I know that many of you are not watching these together in a class. I know that you do have a 0 hour class period to meet, but I've heard from several of y'all that you're essentially watching these independently. Um, that's been okay up to this point, but we're rapidly approaching the point where you're going to need to be together during that class period, either already having watched these and ready to discuss our video lessons, or watching them together, either on a presentation screen or just individually watching them on your laptops and then having discussion. But the point where you can schedule your TOK around your other classes is rapidly heading towards that rear view mirror. So from this point on, I'm going to assume in these lectures that you are together. Obviously, if that's not the case, just adapt the instructions accordingly. But do recognize I do expect you guys to be discussing this material. TOK is very much a discussion-oriented class. Our first topic today is peer teaching. Peers, that's people on the same level or skill. This is a preparation for the oral presentation. So the TOK peer teaching exercise has two critical functions. The first, and probably the most important, is it is a preparation for the oral presentation. The TOK oral is an important part of your TOK scoring. It is an official IB assessment, and it represents a substantial portion of your grade with the IB. It's also something where a lot of students struggle. Many students just aren't comfortable getting up and talking in a formal presenter to audience fashion. You guys are great at discussions, but not so good with a structured presentation. And given the importance of the TOK oral, we're going to use peer teaching to make sure that everyone has had some experience standing in front of a class, delivering information with skill and confidence. And this is designed to reinforce that. The other important thing is there's a certain amount of reading that has to be done for TOK. And Plato and a Platypus is one of our texts. It is the only textbook that we use in this junior semester. The workbook, Green Eggs and Ham, is very useful. I hope you enjoyed our lesson on it and have your annotations firmly established. You should have that book with you for every class, and you should be using it to make notes, annotations, things you want to remember. It's very, very important to use your workbook. But the Plato and a Platypus book represents something different. It is outside reading. And although I don't assign, especially by IB standards, anything like a substantial amount of reading, I still have to make sure that you've done the reading. And I could give checks, I could give quizzes, I could make you write written responses to every reading. I don't want you to fake it till you make it. I want you to have legitimate interaction with these texts. So peer teaching is just a way to make sure that it's clear to us who has read and understood the material and who has fallen behind. Uh, I'm not judging, but if you don't know, I need to know you don't know, you know? Well, the TOK oral presentation is only one of the two assessments. It's substantial. For your IB assessments for TOK, you will do a 10-minute individual oral presentation. That is 10 minutes of concentrated discussion and analysis of a real world scenario, the knowledge claims which might generate or which might come off of that scenario, but most importantly, uh, the the deeper knowledge questions, the TOK aspect of that real world scenario, and being able to discuss those in terms of the ways of knowing, the areas of knowledge, the relationship of knowledge to the knower, and so on. That doesn't just happen. First attempts at TOK oral presentations are pretty uniformly awful. Um, in the number of years I've been doing this, I've seen two, two that were acceptable on a first draft. Um, one of those went on to become improved and be the best presentation that I've seen. The other one, the student was, hey, he liked it, it's okay, and made no significant changes and did not score particularly well. They had the potential, they had all the fundamentals, but they never really put it together. I don't want to wait until you're seniors and you have all kinds of pressures on you to complete your courses, to get your college applications in, to get your scholarship essays done, to get your graduation requirements, to go to that one last party, to do whatever it is that you're supposed to be doing as seniors. So we're going to focus on getting the skills down for the TOK oral during this semester. You will come up with your ideas at the end of this year, and you will present your TOK oral when we come back for the beginning of your senior year. Now, the IB is not really picky about some of the details of your oral presentation. You can simply stand or even sit and give a talk for 10 minutes. You can have videos, PowerPoint presentations, Prezi's keynote presentations. Um, I've seen some interactive oral presentations that actually included some audience participation, although that's a very, very, very small part based on the way the presentation is scored. The important thing is no matter how you deliver your presentation, only the oral presentation itself, your speech to your audience, your introduction, exploration, and development of your ideas through spoken language is considered in the grading. In other words, all those other bells and whistles exist to help you be comfortable, confident, and clear in your presentation. If you have handouts, if you have charts, graphs, none of those are scored. They will not look at those when they look at the rubric and enter your score. So I will be grading you for your oral presentation, and that grade will be determined by what you say. So the focus on the peer teaching must always remain on what do you say? How effectively do you say it? Do you speak loudly, clearly, and with confidence? Or do you kind of rumble down, get paper, Watership Down? Dude, what the hell? Okay? You need to be up there teaching. So, peer teach is the way we're going to do that. Now, we're very lucky. Um, it's one thing to show you what a good presentation looks like, but then the problem becomes people want to just copy the good presentation. And as the saying goes, all happy families are happy in different ways, but all sad families are sad the same. I'm terribly misquoting that. It's one of the Russian authors. I don't know what the purpose of Russian literature is. It's certainly not entertainment. Friend of mine learned Russian so he could read these classics in Russian to determine what he was missing, and the answer was they were actually worse in the original. Anyway, I have for you a model bad presentation. This bad presentation includes almost every one of the possible pitfalls. About the only thing you can say about this is that the gentleman speaks loudly. We'll just go ahead and take a watch.
Hello and welcome to my presentation about my hobbies. I'm going to tell you about all the things I like. Okay, these are some of the things that I like. Oh, where's my book? Okay. I like to play football. My favourite team is Bradford City. I used to play for a team but I gave up. Because I enjoy stopping opponents from scoring, the position I enjoy playing most is goalkeeper. A few years ago, I went to Wembley. It was one of the most exciting experiences of my life. England were playing against Belgium. We struggled at the start of the game. However, we finally won 3-1. I love playing rugby. Mountain biking is lots of fun. Minecraft is fantastic. And that's the title, Other Hobbies. These are my other hobbies. Oh, I don't know why that picture's there. One day, I want to be a professional footballer, and I would love to cycle all around the world. Thank you very much.
Well, I hope that helped underscore what not to do. Tomorrow, I am going to have in lesson 8, I'm going to have a sample peer teach for you, a quick 10-minute lesson. It may be less than 10 minutes because it's over the introduction to Plato and a Platypus called Philogagging. That's pages 1 through 5. Obviously, that's much shorter. Most of the chapters run 20 to 30 pages, which is not a lot. This is still a light book. But I will have a peer teach for you. It is critical that before tomorrow's class, you read the introduction to Plato and a Platypus, Philogagging. That starts on page 1, ends on page 5. You should have read, I can't stress this enough, peer teaching is designed as a review, not an introduction. If you wait until someone peer teaches a topic and then you go back and try and do the reading, all you're going to have is their impressions of the work reinforced by your skimming. It's much more important that you read the work first and then use the peer teach as a comprehension check. Did you get out of it what your peers got out of it? So by tomorrow, Plato and a Platypus introduction. Now, next week, I want to say Monday is the 3rd, so I will double check that before I finish off the slide vids for the video. By Tuesday, February 4th, I want you to have read Metaphysics, that's chapter 1. I would like you to annotate or carefully note That means marking up your text with comments, questions, definitions. Basically, anytime you're reading something, if you see something that changes your thinking in some way, you need to annotate it. If you have to look up something, you need to gloss. That means provide definitions. Now, you can put those definitions in your Green Eggs and Ham workbook and simply make a note in your Plato and a Platypus text to see glossary. You'll use that a lot. Chapter 1 is the last chapter I will be teaching for y'all. After that, it's going to be up to you. I've taken the liberty of dividing up the remaining chapters into two-person teams, and I have the first several teams assigned, and let me go ahead and roll that out to you now. So that you see here, we have weeks. That's the Monday of each week, February 10th, 17th, 24th, and March 2nd. That is the next 4 weeks after the next week's lesson on metaphysics. Chapter 2, logic. All I have is emails. I realized I did not have a roster for this course when I was recording this audio. So I'm going to go with Jenny and Will. Epistemology, Amelie and Jax, ethics, Colin and Sanafessa, and philosophy of religion, Elle and Omar. Now, obviously, if I've screwed up somebody's name based on trying to interpret an email, I trust that you will forgive me. If you won't forgive me, we will settle this like gentlemen with swords at dawn. Okay, enough about peer teaching. Let's get into one of my favorite things to do, and that's using media. I minored in film and media theory at UT Dallas when I was getting my bachelor's. I have a bachelor's degree in arts and performance and literary studies dual major. So yes, I'm one of those kids who looked at the menu and said, yes, I'll take every class, thank you. We're going to look at using film, and we have an upcoming film study, but I wanted to give you a quick introduction to that process. So we're going to do a highly accelerated version of that today. So, although it may be true that in ancient Western tradition, all of creation was composed of 4 elements, and then in medieval thinking, 5 elements, and in Eastern traditions, a different set of 5 elements. In theory of knowledge, when it comes to analyzing TOK in the real world, is there a real world? Is there? When it comes to analyzing TOK in the real world, we're really looking at 3 elements, 3 essential parts of the knowledge experience as expressed through TOK. The first is the real life situation. This is the real life scenario, the observable thing in our world, which prompts our discussion. This is followed by the knowledge claim. What do we think we know or can know based on what we see in this real world scenario? And finally, the knowledge question. The knowledge question, capital Q question. This is what universal statement about knowers and knowing, or about the human experience, or possibly the transhuman experience, can we take from the knowledge claims and real world scenario we've been presented with? Now, this is kind of a tough thing to wrap your head around, so we're going to walk through it very quickly using a short media study. This media is under 5 minutes long, and it comes from my days as a young high school student. So I hope that I'm able to make some kind of connection for you and help explain the 3 TOK elements. Our real world scenario t- begins with a situation in the late 60s and early 70s. A British author named Richard Adams, observed that in the English countryside, in an area called the Downs, there were a number of wild rabbit colonies, groups of rabbits living together, just in nature in this area. And this area was somewhat less typical for rabbits. Rabbits tended to live in well, anyway, this was not normal rabbit territory, but he noticed that there were a couple colonies of rabbits living in this area. Being an author, he decided to take the ideas that this generated in his mind and create a novel. And that novel was called Watership Down. Watership is the name of one of the downs, a low hill, usually covered by grass on the slopes and trees at the top. And this is an actual place, and there were actual rabbits. So, in this world of the novel, and later it was made into a film in 1978, in this world, we saw the rabbits of Watership Down anthropomorphized, treated as human characters in many ways. And we get an introduction to their mythology, specifically the myth of El Arrera. This is, to the rabbits in this world of the novel, their creation story. It is their genesis, if you will. And it's their way of understanding who they are and where they come from. The claim that could be generated here is that rabbits would use mythology to explain the world and the order of their existence, lacking science, lacking other ways of knowing. They would rely on myth.
Long ago, the great Frith made the world. He made all the stars, and the world lived among the stars. Frith made all the animals and birds, and at first made them all the same. Now among the animals was El Arrera, the Prince of Rabbits. He had many friends, and they all ate grass together. But after a time, the rabbits wandered everywhere, multiplying and eating as they went. Then Frith said to El Arrera, "Prince Rabbit, if you cannot control your people, I shall find ways to control them." But El Arrera would not listen and said to Frith, "My people are the strongest in the world." This angered Frith, so he determined to get the better of El Arrera. He gave a present to every animal and bird, making each one different from the rest. When the fox came, and others like the dog and cat, and hawk and weasel, to each of them, Frith gave a fierce desire to hunt and slay the children of El Arrera. Then El Arrera knew that Frith was too clever for him, and he was frightened. He had never before seen the Black Rabbit of Death. "My friend," said Frith, "have you seen El Arrera? For I wish to give him a gift." No, I have not seen him. So Frith said, "Come out, and I will bless you instead." "No, I cannot. I am busy. The fox and weasel are coming. If you want to bless me, you'll have to bless my bottom." "Very well. Be it so." And Elahrera's tail grew shining white and flashed like a star. And his back legs grew long and powerful. And he tore across the hill faster than any creature in the world. All the world will be your enemy, Prince with 1,000 enemies. And whenever they catch you, they will kill you. But first they must catch you, digger, listener, runner, Prince with the swift warning. Be cunning, full of tricks, and your people will never be destroyed.
Okay, so I hope you enjoyed the story of Lord Frith and the Prince of Rabbits, Elahrera. So knowledge questions. So we have this claim that rabbits are going to use mythology. You could say that their beliefs form an indigenous knowledge system. These are the traditions handed down through their oral tradition. They don't have writing, they don't have history, they don't have science, so they make up stories to explain their reality, and those stories become the accepted wisdom, the knowledge shared by these rabbit characters. If you were to look at your TOK diagram and you put the rabbits in the middle, having no written language, having very short transitory memory. Individual rabbits just don't live long enough to amass those kind of life experiences. We don't know the creative capacity of rabbits, the imagination, but Richard Adams imagines them as being storytellers in a sort of rustic British English tradition. So that does give them some access to imagination. We don't know a lot about their emotional lives, but based on the story of Elahrera, we know that rabbits are keenly aware of their mortality, of the challenges that life presents them and the dangers which they face. So that's very much emotion. Sense perception. A rabbit's eye view of the world is a very low and small and local view. So their understanding of big questions and deeper issues is largely going to be guided by faith. And that faith comes from their religious and indigenous knowledge systems. If you consider the belief in the Frith mythology to be their religion, then their understanding, you would say, falls into religious knowledge systems. If you think it is more cultural than it is a developed theology, you might argue that it is an indigenous knowledge system. They lack natural sciences. They lack mathematics and history. There is some concern as to how you're supposed to treat one another and be treated. So you might argue that the rabbits could show ethics. Their stories themselves are evidence of the arts. The human sciences, I'm sorry, in this case, rabbit sciences, again, lacking any kind of formal reasoning. There's not a really structured approach to understanding. All of this is a way to investigate the knowledge question from the perspective of the rabbits in the novel, which is an exploration by a human of the real world situation of what a rabbit's doing living in these hills. I hope you can see that there's a lot of questions here. There's far more questions than answers. you could take any one of these components and drag it off, tease it out, and develop a series of inquiries, an exploration, a discussion, an artistic response, a experimental response. There's lots of ways that this knowledge question could find expression in your own personal knowing. I want to take just a moment and introduce one idea for you that might help you understand what's going on with the world of Watership Down. Okay, so I'm going to try and wrap this up very quickly because this is literally a topic that I've talked about all day in the past. And this is one of my favorite things to learn and to teach. So if you ever want to know about the monomyth or archetypes of the hero's journey, I'm your man. Please come talk to me. Watership Down, including its creation myth, is an example of what Joseph Campbell called the monomyth. The monomyth is the archetypical hero's journey. In human societies, archetypes are sort of essential story templates of stories, characters, and themes that recur, that show up over and over again. And one myth, according to Campbell, in his book, The Hero with a Thousand Faces, is the dominant myth of human experience, that all cultures have their version or versions of the monomyth. In this story, the hero goes on a journey into a special world, leaving the ordinary world behind, overcoming foes and obstacles aided by his companions and mentors, even facing death or ultimate darkness of some kind to restore order to the natural world and to change in some way the world to what it should be, and the hero is changed by his or her experience. What makes this an archetype is that variations on this story, this basic pattern, appear in all times, in all places, and among all peoples. The earliest example we have of the monomyth is probably the story of Gilgamesh, which is the first epic poem from Babylon, and the Babylonian Sumerian people. We have it in the Greeks, we have it in the Christian tradition, we have it in Asian traditions, we have it Native American, African, Inuit, Aleut. If there were people in Antarctica, we imagine they would have their version of the monolith. And in modern times, it appears in everything from Harry Potter and Star Wars to Shrek and every episode of Dora Explorer. It is the fundamental template of the story. So one knowledge question might be, why do humans use the monomyth to understand the world around them? And some possible answers include, we use the monomyth because it is an accurate description of human experience. It shows up over and over again because that's the pattern the world follows. Another possible explanation is that we see the monomyth because it's aesthetically pleasing. It's a form of story that we understand, and we gravitate to it because it is a satisfying story. And the reason we see it over and over again in all these different cultures is because we've trained ourselves to see the world in terms of the monomyth. Okay, that is a lot to take in. We will get into more detail on this on another day. I just want to talk very quickly about vocabulary, and we will wrap up for today. So this brings us to the end of our Introduction to Media Studies. I hope that you were able to follow it, that it raised more questions than it answered, and that you're excited to get into films and start breaking films down into terms of what do they tell us, what can we take from them, what do we bring as knowers to our experience of storytelling. The last thing I wanted to point out is in your green eggs and ham, in your useful vocabulary, you should probably add archetype. And there are a number of definitions relating in psychology and in sociology. You want to use the literary sociological meaning, not the psychological meaning. Psychological archetypes are a whole different story for another day, built around the same basic idea of recurring themes or recurring elements. So archetypes, and you might want to add the monomyth. The monomyth is just so important to understanding different cultures and different stories from different people. It's certainly worth having in your toolkit as a way of analyzing the stories and people that you come across in our studies. I hope that you have a good day, and I look forward to finishing reading all of your papers. I look forward very much to our media study together. Have an excellent day.